So this video is a quick walkthrough of some of the papers by Michael Robinson that are relevant to his sheaf work. And this is the first paper of the series of 3 that I'm going to mention. This one was on the archives, and then an adjusted version of it came out in the Journal of Physics Communication. So all 3 of these are open access. You can just download them. And I'm just flashing them up on the screen so you can get the URL up here if you want it. Or you can Google it. So this is the paper I'm going to be going into a little more detail on and sort of explaining some of the points of the paper. Okay, and this one is a specific example of what the other ones built up theoretically. So this is a practical example, and these ones are more theoretical. So what we're doing here is, rather than just looking at one sheaf to solve one problem, you're taking essentially a collection of them and doing a sheaf of sheaves, sort of a meta discussion. And so this is showing how to tie all these guys together so you can solve the problems at once. If you remember with my polynomial example, I had, let's say I had a polynomial of degree 1, a polynomial of degree 2, and so forth, and I had a set of points over here, but I was only one at a time creating a sheaf. I would create a sheaf that found the best fit constant, and then I created a sheaf that created the best fit line, and then the best fit quadratic, and so on and so forth. But in this case, the argument is, why don't we just do all of them at once and let the super sheaf actually figure out which of the resolutions is best. So that's the driving theory. Okay, so this particular example revolves around stars, actual physical stars. Let's see if I can get a picture here. Like if there's a photograph made on really, really sensitive equipment that can actually detect 1 pixel at a time. So for example, you may have, a single star or several stars together, and so this is just one example that he's discussing. I just wanted to bring this image up suggestively. So what I want you to imagine is there's the nighttime sky, and you're looking up at it and see a couple of stars, but not you. Some very, very delicate electronic equipment that is so sensitive that it can receive 1 photon. So 1 photon comes from this star and hits this image. This is the sensitive receiving equipment. And maybe this star hits here, and this star also hits here. So it's hitting the pixels inside your equipment, your camera of some sort, and then you're going to analyze what's going on. Okay? So the object of the game here is to count how many stars we have that are being reflected in the image. So there's some stars that made an impact on our equipment, and we want to know how many stars we were observing. All right, so there's an algorithm called CLEAN that is a famous algorithm for dealing with that, and there's another famous algorithm that is going to be analyzed in this paper, and it's called Richardson-Lucy. So those 2 algorithms are going to be compared against the sheaf algorithm to see how well they perform on a collection of sample data. Okay, so this is the problem statement. N is the number of stars that are in the physical sky, and D is the Dirac delta function. Okay, and then this is just the statement of the problem that we have at hand, where we're trying to sort out what I just said. Figure 1 shows you exactly what that formula is saying. So let's just take that apart for a second. Okay, so these 2 red arrows, I just am highlighting them for a second so you can see where they are. They're right there. Those are representing our 2 stars, and they have a different perceived magnitude from the Earth, and so we're going to call that a relative magnitude. Okay, so we'll use the word relative magnitude because we're perceiving it from Earth versus absolute magnitude. Like if you had a spaceship and you could go up there and see all the stars where they actually are, this is how they're perceived from Earth. Okay, so the point here is that the photon count on our equipment is presumed to be proportional to the relative magnitude of that star, or each star. And then each of these little bars, okay, so each of these little bars, if you notice, it is representing one piece of the grid, which is being hit by the pixels. And it is discrete, it is discretized. Notice this is 1, this is 3, and so forth. Only the even ones are listed, but you can see none of the bars are anything else. They're just full integers. And the other thing you're going to notice is that this is going to kind of almost be like bell-shaped of some sort around the tall one, and it's almost like you're adding in a second one like that. That's kind of what's going on. That's what you would expect, and that's what you get. So the question is your algorithm clever enough to figure out that this is actually an expression of 2 stars hitting your equipment and not just 1 star? Because you may just look at this and say, well, this kind of looks like 1 star to me. I don't see 2 stars there. That's what I would guess if I'm just guessing. But is the algorithm smarter than that? Okay, down here in this formula we're looking at, we want to know what this means. Well, the letter I is going to be meaning that this right here is the magnitude of the actual star. Again, it's the relative magnitude, and then this is the location. Okay, so this is the location. In other words, the star obviously is going to live in 3-dimensional space, but we perceive it in 2-dimensional space when we look up at the night sky. So that's where we get that from. And so we can use this equivalently to represent this. So you can think of it kind of both ways. It doesn't really matter because we're not going to have negative magnitudes anyway. But we can use this r cross r squared space to represent that. Again, it's just your magnitude, and then location is 2 dimensions. So that's what that means. Okay, since there are n stars, this is why we end up with I to the n. So this means there's 3n pieces of data in this structure, right? Because each I has 3 pieces of data in it. Okay, but we want to look at this expression too. What does this mean? This is just mathematically saying we're going to mod out by something. We're going to get rid of the fact that we don't actually care what order they are in. So this is just the permutations of n items. So it just means like if we have stars A, B, and C, and we record them as B, C, and A, we don't care what order they're in as long as we get 3 stars. We're going to consider those to be equivalent solutions. Okay, and so we have Hess diagrams. I've sometimes called them Hess diagrams. It's a German last name, and I think it's Hesse. But this is the diagrams that I used when we were talking about the map problem, where if you have a PO set, which is partially ordered set, and there's arrows going all over the place, it can be confusing. So it's easier, Hesse said, why don't we just use gravity to represent this? And not only that, so like everything that's going down has a down arrow implied. It's just much easier than drawing in all those arrows. But also if you have transitivity, it is not necessary to write in all the links. In some applications you may want all the links, like the one I did, but sometimes it's not necessary to write in the intermediate. This extra one is not necessary because you already get this by transitivity. So it really depends on your application, but it can really simplify your graphics. Okay, let's just go to this diagram here. So this we just discussed. This means we want to pick up n stars and we don't care what order. Okay, and then this expression is just telling us This is about pixel number M. That's what's going on. Pixel M is taking care of us. And what's it doing? It's going to result in this measurement. So the result is we find out how many photons are hitting the pixel. So the pixel reports essentially how many photons it observed. And it's essentially the expected or detected brightness per pixel. So the other way you can think of this is you can think of this whole thing as telling you the brightness per pixel. So that whole thing is telling us a certain brightness per each pixel. So that's how that's working out. Okay, moving right along to this expression, this part of the paper, they're saying over here that we want to figure out what n is. So rather than starting with n, we want to reverse engineer what n is actually. So rather than starting with n and then getting this model to work forward, we're looking at the whole system from a different angle and saying, hey, do we have enough information to reverse engineer what the proper value is for n? All right, and that also means that this whole expression here that we were looking at, if we don't worry about the topology and we're only worrying about the question of how many stars there are, then we go down to this simplified expression, which is simply counting the number of stars. Okay, so that reduces the problem. All right, and then we're going to move on to the next page, which has some cool diagrams. This is over here, awesome diagram. Okay, so this is exactly explaining what we were seeing when we did the polynomial problem, where we kept increasing the magnitude, the degree of the polynomial, and eventually we got to the right answer, which in our case was just 3. Then when we did 4 and 5, it didn't change, our local consistency radius because we were already at the best model. These other models are not bad, but they're a waste of effort. They don't hurt anything. But as you're moving into this model, you're moving into the actual knowing the correct number of stars, and then what's going to happen is a bright star might be detected as 2 weaker stars, or something like that. But it is essentially the same solution. Okay, then we move on to this picture. And we're going to now bundle all the models together and make themselves a sheaf. So now we're going to bundle these guys and turn them into a different sheaf. Okay, and so we're going to now try to figure out what n is based on this bigger structure. So that's what we are going to be doing in the second video about polynomials, not the initial one. So the follow-up video on polynomials is going to do this very thing, but with polynomials instead of stars. Okay, and this right here is a grid of pixels, and it's counts. So that is your original results from your equipment or your camera, saying here's a grid of pixels on my camera and the brightness on each pixel. That's, but it's actually discretized because we're counting photons. It's very sensitive equipment. So we actually have integers on there instead of like something else. Okay, so it's integers on a grid of pixels. Okay, so what are the results of these things? We scroll down to the results. At least that's what I'm going to do. You can read the whole paper if you like. Okay, so what's happening is here's our tests that are being performed, and the first couple are just going to be like easy kind of tests, and then they get kind of more moderate or complicated. So that's roughly the order in which the experiments are being done, and they're going to compare them against Kleene and Richardson-Lucy. So you can see how the sheaf model works compared to these other two methods. Okay, I just sort of zoomed out here because it's really hard to get the whole page together on one view. So the goal here is to be as close to 100% as possible. And I'm going to put in some marks to make it easier to read this graph. Okay, so the goal is 100%. So the 100% is, where is it? Okay, it's right here. It's the top of those three lines. I put horizontal lines at 100, 75, and 50, so you can see that the sheaf is outperforming clean. You can tell by looking at where the boxes are. And then again, it's also outperforming Richardson Lucy. And again, the sheaf is performing in the, much more of the data, or they're going to be between 75 and 100% efficiency than the other two models. Okay, and also, what about location? The location of the stars, I'll do the same kind of a discussion there. Okay, and you can see I made the same 3 orange bars in the 3 graphs so you can compare them against each other. The goal is to get as close to 0, which is the bottom of the 3 lines. I made the lines at 0, 50%, and 100%, or 0.5 and 1. And these are errors. And you notice that the sheaf model does better than the other two. Okay, so it's in that 0 to 0.5 range pretty consistently. Yeah, so even for example, the tests in which clean does pretty well, in those cases sheaf does better. And finally, for the brightness of the star, the sheaf outperforms again, and the goal is to get as small to be as small as possible. Definitely outperforms Lucy. Okay, so maybe performs on par with clean, and yeah, so definitely outperforms Richardson Lucy for the brightness of the stars. Okay, so that's what those charts are saying, and that's it for that paper. Hopefully that helps you understand what they're doing in that paper, and ask me if you have any questions, and if I don't know, I'm just going to ask Robinson because it's his work. Have fun.